As President Donald Trump continues to battle COVID-19 at Walter Reed Medical Center in Bethesda, Maryland, many people are wondering how the diagnosis is going to impact the debates and elections. Early in-person voting begins all over the state just 10 days from now. Joining us now to discuss this is Daily Maverick Associate Editor and U.S. politics expert Brooks Spector. Thank you so much, Mr. Spector, for taking the time to talk to us this evening. What impact, will his hospitalization, will President Donald Trump's hospitalization have on the debate that he still needs to take part in, and also the elections?
Well, good evening. Good to be with you. I mean, the question of the impact is dependent to some degree on the severity of his symptoms and his ability to be given free rein to campaign again, because he is now in quarantine. He will be presumably for about 2 weeks. Given the fact that the election is a month away, that basically cuts down the campaign for Donald Trump to half of the time that's available. There is a debate between the vice presidential candidates this week, and it now means there's certainly an open question as to whether there will be a second or a third debate between the two presidential candidates. The polls seem to be holding steady in Joe Biden's favor on a national basis, and at least in most of the swing states, those states which will actually ultimately determine how this thing comes out. The problem, though, for the Trump campaign is deeper. It's lost its message. It was busy trying to, in the person of Donald Trump and in the rest of its message, it was busy trying to move away from the COVID pandemic as it affected American society, and saying, in effect, we have turned the corner, that the economic circumstances will get better, and the campaign is all about law and order. But, of course, if the president, the first citizen of the country, is in the hospital because of the pandemic, that really changes the dynamic away from the way the Trump campaign wanted it to be, and puts it right smack in the middle of COVID is here, it's not yet under control, it's dangerous, and the whole country must pull together, which is the heart of Joe Biden's message.
And do you think that, at the back of that, he could then change his strategy? Because you look at what he had to say in that debate. I mean, and I quote, "I put a mask on when I think I need it. I don't wear masks like him. Every time you see him, he's got a mask. He could be speaking 200 feet away, and he shows up with the biggest mask I've ever seen." And this is what he was saying to Joe Biden. And Biden was laughing in response, saying that it makes a big difference. And, of course, you look at how, Joe Biden, he himself is COVID-19 free. I mean, when you look at how the messaging has been from, President Donald Trump's campaign and really downplaying the issue of COVID-19, do you get a sense that on the other side of this, he could then, be someone that we are looking at who would be adjusting his strategy going forward? Because certainly this is a moment that has really caused some irony here.
No, it's certainly, irony is the kindest word you can think of, I guess. But, yes, candidates can change their message. They can change the nuance, or they can modulate it through various versions of things. But when you're just a few weeks away from people voting, and, in fact, when people are already voting, and the estimates are that over 1 million people have already voted by advanced balloting or mail-in ballots, and I suspect by the time that you and I are talking tonight, it's probably larger than that. That was the figure a couple of days ago. You can't change the message for the people who have already voted because they've already made their decision. And it looks enormously disruptive to your message if on day one you say it's A, and then on day two you say, oh, no, it's actually Z. That's very hard to swallow. People find that difficult to believe. And the whole Trump campaign has, as someone was explaining it to me today, it's only about Trump. It's been all Trump, and it's been about the Trump character and persona and a giant presence on the stage. And if he is locked in a quarantine room, coughing but getting better or stable, depending depending on what medical bulletin you see. Changing that campaign is not a question of nuance anymore. It's a question of black and white. And that's going to be a very difficult sell to make. The other part of that, of course, is that it'd be very hard to find people at this point in time who haven't already made up their minds about who they're going to support. And I say that because the polling has been consistent for at least 6 months. There's an 8 to 10 point lead nationally on the polling for Joe Biden. And in most of those swing states, it has consistently been Joe Biden's way. And crucially, among white, suburban, college-educated women, an increasingly large share of the electorate, Joe Biden has a very large bulge relative to the president. And that's the kind of person who's not simply going to change their mind on a whim. They're making decisions as they think about voting on issues of character, but also substantive issues like preserving national health care, keeping up what is called pre-existing condition circumstance. In other words, if you change your health care plan, usually in some circumstances, they won't cover you if you have already had, say, a liver condition or previously it had cancer or whatever it was. And the Obamacare Act, the Affordable Care Act, made it much more difficult for insurance companies to refuse you. And much of the Republican rhetoric has been about, at least in part, getting away from any such protections. And if that's true, people like those white, suburban, college-educated women find the Trump administration an anathema. And so they're not going to switch suddenly because of the sympathy vote for a president who is ailing.
And tonight, the focus is not only on the president. For some, the focus is on the staff at the White House. Really, this changes how things are working inside there. Certainly, possibly even maybe a lot of panic behind those, those walls. Do you think this is a code red moment?
Well, I don't know whether it's a code red, but there's certainly a flashing light going on. Now, there are several different layers to this. The continuity of control for the military of nuclear weapons, to be blunt about it, that remains in a secure and safe process. Far too many people are involved in making sure that it does. But the whole political apparatus of the White House is now, I suspect, being consumed by individual concerns about whether or not they are vulnerable or whether or not they're positive in testing, and in their inability to know what's going to happen next, because one day John and Mary have it, and the next day Sue has it too, and then on the third day, my goodness, the president now has it, and on the day after that, yet more people on the staff and people who have worked with the president, say, in prepping for the debate, turn out to also have it. And so I would imagine that within the political sphere of the White House, there's a certain degree of concern. One of the reasons why, and people don't often realize this, is that everybody works in very close quarters. You think of the White House as this grand building, but the staff working quarters, people are actually doing their day-to-day work, are cramped and crowded. And it's except for the fact that they have walls between each other, it has about as much space as a person might have in a call center.
Wow. And I mean, how important is the messaging going to be around his health? Because we saw a short while ago the doctors coming out to say that, one of the, that the messages was that he was not on oxygen this morning, and subsequently reporters coming out to say, oh, was he on oxygen any other time? And then also that 72 hours that the doctors had to talk about, and then a reporter saying, is it 72 or 48 hours? How important is the messaging around him going to be right now as Americans and the rest of the world are being given an update on his health?
Well, you're quite right to point to the timeline as crucial, because the timeline ties into the question of who was in contact with whom and how do you trace that and how far you have to trace it. For example, on Saturday, no, sorry, not Saturday, the other day, today's Saturday, on Thursday, there was a ceremony at the White House for the, I beg your pardon, Saturday last week, there was a ceremony at the White House introducing the newest nominee to the Supreme Court, Anna Coney Barrett, who would replace the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And at that point, it is possible that there were several people who were already asymptomatic carriers. That is, they already had a viral load from it. It had not yet been tested, and they did not yet show symptoms. And if that's true, of the several hundred people who were there, they all have to be traced, and their people that they met in the subsequent days have all got to be traced. And several of the people who were there, several senators, the president of Notre Dame University, where the nominee used to teach, test positive. Hope Hicks, who is a special assistant to the president, is now positive. As a result, it becomes like a balloon that keeps expanding, and you have to figure out where all the mixed people were. And that should encourage a certain degree of panic. And then reporters begin to wonder, who did they meet and who did they bump into who were asymptomatic but were carriers as well? It becomes an enormous public health endeavor to track down a meeting that has several hundred people in it.
It certainly does look like it's going to be a race against time. Thank you so much for your time tonight.